I heard the front door open when the clock read 11:47 p.m. A dull click of the lock, cautious steps on the wooden floor. She was trying not to make a sound. Stephanie always did this when she came home late, as if trying to dissolve into the silence, hoping I was already asleep. But I wasn't asleep. I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, listening to every movement. "Mark," she called softly. Her voice was steady, without a trace of guilt. She didn't know I was awake. I didn't answer. A minute later, I heard her enter the bathroom and turn on the water. She washed her hands for a long time, then her face. Maybe she was trying to wash away more than just the traces of the day. I waited. When she finally lay down beside me, her body was cold, as if she had spent the entire evening outside. "It's late," I said into the darkness. "There was a lot of work." "I told you." "Yeah, you told me." She turned toward me, her fingers searching for my hand. I could have pretended that everything was fine, that her late nights were just a result of her dedication to her career, that the scent of unfamiliar cologne on her coat was just my imagination. But I couldn't. "Are you sure you were at work?" A brief silence, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. "Of course. Why are you asking?" "Because someone called for you." She froze. "Who?" "I don't know. Unknown number." But when I answered, they hung up. I didn't tell her it happened around 10. I didn't tell her the same number called 3 more times after that, but I stopped picking up. She squeezed my hand slightly. Probably a mistake. Probably. In the darkness, I heard her swallow. Her breathing became just a little deeper, a little slower. She was lying. I knew it. She knew that I knew. But neither of us said a word. I was supposed to leave for work, but instead, I sat in my car outside our house, watching Stephanie walk out. She was flawless, perfect posture, neatly styled hair, a sleek pencil skirt. She always looked like that. Only now, I had started noticing the details. The new perfume that appeared a couple of weeks ago, the late-night call she wouldn't answer in front of me, the messages that disappeared before I could see them. I started the engine and pulled out, following her. Stephanie didn't turn toward her office. She stopped at a small cafe downtown, got out of the car and glanced around. Then a man approached her. Tall, dark-haired, expensive suit, confident stride. He leaned in toward her, and she smiled. Too warmly, too familiarly. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. She touched his hand. He ran his fingers along her wrist. Stephanie had lied to me. But now, I had to find out just how far that lie had gone. I sat in my car, trying to control my breathing. My heart was pounding too loudly. Or was it just my nerves? Stephanie and that man were sitting at a corner table. He leaned in, saying something, and she smiled. That look, the one that used to be just for me. Now, it belonged to someone else. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. I wanted to get up, walk over to them, and ask, "Who the hell is he?" But I didn't. Not yet. She leaned in closer. He whispered something in her ear. She laughed. Quietly, but I knew that laugh. I knew every intonation of her voice. It was intimate. I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language spoke louder than words. I was losing her. Or had I already lost her? My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of them. It felt like I was crossing a line. But what did it matter? She had already crossed it. Half an hour later, they walked out of the cafe. I watched as he opened the door of his car for her. She didn't resist. She got in. A second later, they drove off. I followed them. They stopped at a hotel. Not a restaurant. Not an office. A hotel. A damn hotel. I parked across the street, watching as he took her hand. Watching as she didn't pull away. Watching as she walked inside without even looking back. I felt something collapse inside me. I knew. But it's one thing to suspect. It's another to see it with your own eyes. I sat in my car, paralyzed by the moment. What now? I could storm in there, 'cause a scene. Or I could drive away, pretend like nothing had happened. But I couldn't just forget. I couldn't just leave. I got out of the car and followed them. The hotel lobby was nearly empty. A young woman at the front desk glanced up as I walked in, but I didn't stop. They were at the reception desk. He was speaking to the clerk, and Stephanie stood beside him, arms crossed. I hid behind a column. 1 key or 2? I heard the clerk ask. 1. Say 1. 1, he answered calmly. I felt my stomach drop. She didn't object. He took the key card and led her toward the elevator. She didn't resist. I stepped out of the shadows. For a split second, I thought she saw me. But no, she was too focused on him. The elevator doors closed before my eyes. I was alone. What now? I stared at the elevator panel. I had only a few seconds to decide. I could go after them, or I could turn around and leave, keeping all of this bottled up inside me. But I couldn't walk away. I pressed the call button. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. My insides were churning. I knew that if I stormed in there now, nothing good would come of it. But leaving? No. I pressed the call button and brought my phone to my ear. Mark. Dan's voice was groggy, but immediately laced with concern. He knew something was wrong. She's in a hotel with him, I said, my voice hollow. Silence. Are you sure? I saw it with my own eyes. Dan stayed quiet. I went on. They got a room together. 1 key. I followed them. And now? I don't know. I closed my eyes. My breathing was uneven. Do you want to go up there? Yes. But. What then? What do I do? His silence stretched a little longer this time. Do you really want to see it? I clenched my jaw. I already know. Knowing and seeing are two different things. I didn't answer. Dan exhaled. You need to figure out what you want out of this. Do you want to confront her? Or do you want proof? I rubbed my temple. I want the truth. You already have it. I let out a sharp breath. I need more. Then be smart, Mark. Storming in now is a mistake. Give her a chance to expose herself. I knew he was right. I rested my head against the steering wheel. Shit. Can you get the security footage? I thought about it. Yeah. Then do it. And wait. I stayed silent. I'm here if you need me, Dan said. Thanks. I ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Kevin picked up on the first ring. Mark? What's the emergency? I need security footage from a hotel. Tonight. Oh shit. This serious? Yeah. You know that's illegal, right? Can you do it or not? A pause. I can. But you sure you want to see it? I shut my eyes. Yes. All right. Give me some time. How long? An hour. Maybe less. I'll wait. I sat in my car, eyes fixed on the hotel entrance. An hour passed. Then an hour and a half. Every second dragged. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Kevin. You're not gonna like this. I held my breath before opening the file. A video. I pressed play. The footage was slightly grainy but clear enough. There they were, standing at the door of their room. The man unlocked it, gesturing for her to go in first. She stepped inside without hesitation. She smiled. He placed his hand on her lower back. She didn't pull away. They walked in. The door closed. I set my phone down on the passenger seat and shut my eyes. I was shaking. There was no room for doubt anymore. I didn't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes? Half an hour? Then the hotel doors opened. I looked up. Stephanie stepped out. She smoothed her hair, glanced around. Then she saw me. Our eyes locked. Her face froze. She wasn't expecting me. I waited to see how she was going to explain this. Stephanie froze. Her hand instinctively smoothed her hair, her gaze darting between me and the door behind her. I saw her lips quiver, the way her throat tightened as she struggled to take a breath. She didn't even try to take a step toward me. I opened the car door and stepped out, feeling the storm inside me rise. Go on, explain yourself. My voice was calm, too calm for what was really happening inside me. She blinked, her fingers curling into a fist. Mark, it's not what you think. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Really? She swallowed hard. I took her in, her perfectly styled hair, flawless makeup. But her eyes, they were filled with fear. Then what is it? I asked. She opened her mouth but said nothing. I stepped closer. I saw everything. Her lips lost their color. Saw what? How you walked into that room with him. How he put his hand on your back. How you smiled at him. Her breath hitched. I nodded. I knew you were lying to me. I just wanted to see how far you'd go with it. She shook her head. It's not like that. It was a mistake. I laughed, though nothing about this was funny. A mistake? You accidentally took one key with him? Accidentally walked into that hotel room? I never wanted it to happen this way. But it did. Stephanie clenched her hands at her sides, pressing her lips together. We were just talking. In a hotel room? She swallowed. I stared at her, unblinking. Did you sleep with him? Silence. A long, unbearable silence. Stephanie averted her gaze. Something inside me shattered. She couldn't say no, because it would be a lie. Jesus Christ. I ran a hand down my face, trying to steady myself. How long has this been going on? She looked at me, her eyes glassy. Mark, How long? I repeated, the words like steel in my throat. She closed her eyes. A few weeks. I shook my head. Weeks. I was going to tell you. You were going to tell me? I laughed, the sound raw and bitter. You were just waiting for me to figure it out on my own? Her breathing grew heavier. It's not what you think. I raised a hand. Don't. She fell silent. Who is he? She didn't answer right away. A coworker. I shut my eyes, my jaw tightening. The one you told me about? She nodded. I felt my whole body tremble. You made me feel like a paranoid idiot, like I was imagining things. Stephanie let out a soft sob. I never meant to. But you did. I exhaled slowly. My legs felt weak. I looked at her. Do you love him? Her face twisted in pain. I don't know. You don't know? She swallowed. I'm confused. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling my world collapse. Where were you planning to spend the rest of the night? She looked at me, then quickly turned away. I didn't need her to say it. I took a step back, nodding. Got it. She let out a quiet sob. Mark. I didn't let her finish. I turned and walked back to my car. She didn't follow. As I shut the door, she took a step forward. Wait. I started the engine. Stephanie lifted her hand like she was about to knock on the window, but I was already pulling away. I saw her in the rearview mirror. She was still standing there. The only thing I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I sat in the dark kitchen, a half-finished glass of whiskey in front of me. I had no idea how much time had passed before I heard her footsteps. Slow, careful. She walked in. I didn't look up. You didn't go to him. Silence. I thought you'd be with him tonight. I lifted my head. Stephanie stood in the doorway, her eyes filled with unease. I couldn't. I let out a bitter laugh. Why? Because I caught you walking out of the hotel? She flinched. I stared at her. What are you doing here, Stephanie? She stepped forward. I came to talk. I leaned back in my chair, lacing my fingers together. A little late for that, don't you think? She pressed her lips together, took another step closer. Mark. No. I lifted a hand, stopping her. Now, you listen to me. She froze. I exhaled slowly. You betrayed me. She shut her eyes. You've been lying to me. For weeks. You made me feel like an idiot. Her hands clenched into fists. You didn't trust me. You were following me. I shot up from my chair. You left me no choice. She took a step back, startled by my tone. I ran a hand down my face. I trusted you. And you? I stopped. Saying it out loud hurt too much. Stephanie swallowed hard. I never wanted. I let out a dry laugh. You never wanted? Then why were you with him? She closed her eyes. I don't know. No. You do. I got lost. I stared at her. Lost? I shook my head. Stephanie, you made a choice. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. You knew exactly what you were doing. She let out a choked sob. I never wanted to lose you. I exhaled sharply. But you already did. She froze. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. I looked at her and felt nothing. I was broken. Why did you come home? Her lips trembled. Because I love you. I closed my eyes. You love me? She nodded. Then why did you sleep with him? She didn't answer. I nodded slowly. I can't believe you. Tears welled up in her eyes. Please. I stepped back. I'm tired, Stephanie. She grabbed my hand. Give me a chance to explain. I looked at her. You already have. I pulled my hand free. She didn't move. I walked past her and headed upstairs. I heard her start to cry. I didn't turn back. I couldn't. Mark, I'm not leaving until you hear me out. Her voice was shaky, but there was something firm in it. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Hear you out. I let out a bitter laugh. Stephanie, I've seen everything I need to see. She shook her head. You saw what you wanted to see, but you don't know what really happened. I turned to her sharply. What really happened? My voice cracked with anger. Are you going to tell me it wasn't him? That you somehow ended up in a hotel with your coworker by accident? That he just happened to bring you into his room? She lowered her head. No, it was him. Something inside me twisted painfully. Then what the hell are you trying to explain? She took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. Because I want you to know why it happened. I froze. Those words. They sounded too deliberate, too thought out. I expected her to make excuses, to lie, but her tone. She actually wanted to tell me the truth. But did I want to hear it? You're saying you have an excuse? She shook her head slowly. Not an excuse. A reason. My jaw tightened. And what is it? She swallowed, then met my gaze. Us. I laughed, sharp and humorless. You're blaming me? I'm not blaming you. She ran a hand through her hair, as if trying to collect her thoughts. You changed, Mark. You became distant. I frowned. What? For months, you've been different. Cold. Closed off. I tried to talk to you. But you? I shook my head. I was like that because I knew something was wrong. No. It started before that. She took a step toward me. I'm not saying what I did was right, but I couldn't keep feeling alone. I exhaled sharply. So you're saying you were lonely? That you needed attention? Her lips pressed together. I needed you. Those words hit harder than I expected. I turned away, suddenly unsure of what to say. Stephanie watched me closely. Mark, I'm not justifying myself. I just want you to know the truth. I looked at her. Are you telling me this because you're afraid to lose me? Or because you actually regret it? Pain flickered across her face. I regret it. I swear. I studied her, searching her eyes for a lie. But all I saw was fear. And regret. I want to know everything. She hesitated. Are you sure? Absolutely. She took a deep breath. All right. I'll tell you. I nodded. She sank into a chair, staring at a fixed point. It started 2 months ago. I sat down across from her, feeling my pulse hammer in my chest. I'm listening. Everything started 2 months ago. Stephanie began, but I already knew. I wouldn't be able to take it. I shot up from my chair. She froze. Mark. My jaw clenched. I can't. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? I shook my head. I don't want to hear it. Her lips trembled. But you said you wanted to know? I looked at her. Yeah, I said that. And I was wrong. I couldn't listen to her talk about it. About him. About how she let him touch her. How she chose him while I sat at home, completely unaware. I couldn't. I'm leaving. Her eyes widened. What? Where? I didn't answer. I turned, grabbed my keys from the table, and headed for the door. Mark. Wait. I didn't stop. Don't do this, please. I stepped outside and slammed the door behind me. Got into the car. Started the engine. Stephanie ran out after me. Mark, don't go. Her voice cracked. I didn't look at her. I hit the gas. The tires screeched against the pavement. She disappeared in the rearview mirror. I drove with no destination. The streets of Chicago were empty. Streetlights blurred past the windows. Cars flashed by in the distance. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get away. From her. From home. From all of it. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Stephanie. I ignored it. A minute later, another call. Then a message. Please come back. I gripped the wheel. Not now. I turned off the main road and pulled into a park. Killed the engine. let my head fall back against the seat. My chest tightened. I could feel something inside me breaking apart. I thought I could handle it, that I could hear her out. But I couldn't. I didn't want the details. I didn't want to picture them together. I just wanted to forget. But how? I shut my eyes. Somewhere in the distance, cars rumbled down the highway. The wind rustled through the trees. I was alone. And for the first time in a long time, I truly felt lost. I pulled up to the house and sat there for a while, staring at the dark windows. The bedroom light was off. Was she waiting for me? Or had she given up and gone to sleep, too exhausted to keep fighting? I stepped out of the car, slamming the door shut. The cold air stung my face, but it did nothing to cool the rage boiling inside me. When I walked into the house, I saw her immediately. She was sitting on the couch in the living room, legs crossed, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were filled with anxiety. She had been waiting. You came back? I slowly closed the door, never taking my eyes off her. Yeah. She swallowed hard. You didn't answer. I said nothing. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit. I didn't know if you would. You thought I'd just disappear? Her lips trembled. I don't know what to think. I took a few steps forward, and she stiffened. I noticed it. Her body betrayed her fear. But I wasn't going to hurt her. I was going to make her feel what I felt. I lowered myself into the armchair across from her, crossed one leg over the other, and stared at her. So, go on, Steph. Let's talk. She blinked. What? You wanted me to hear you out. I'm here. Tell me how you spent your evening. Her shoulders tensed. Mark. Start from the moment you walked into the hotel room. She shut her eyes. Please. No, go on. You wanted to explain yourself, right? A quiet sob escaped her. I watched her, my expression cold. You want me to forgive you? Her head snapped up. Yes. Then help me understand exactly what it is I'm supposed to forgive. She hugged herself tighter. You already know what happened. I want to hear it from you. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I kissed him. Something inside me twisted painfully. You kissed him. She nodded, avoiding my eyes. And then? Mark, don't. I shot to my feet. She flinched at the sudden movement. Don't? I let out a sharp laugh, but there was nothing humorous in it. You're asking me not to push you? You pushed me this whole time. You looked me in the eye and lied to me. I never wanted. But you did. She covered her face with her hands. I stepped closer, leaning toward her. What did you feel when you were with him? Her head snapped up. Don't ask me that. Why? Afraid to tell me the truth? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You just want me to suffer. I held her gaze. Yes. A choked sob escaped her. You've changed. I smirked. Yeah, I have. I ran a hand through my hair and turned away. I can't just go back, Steph. Her sobs grew louder. But you're here. I met her gaze. For now. She bit her lip, her whole body trembling with grief. I watched her, and for the first time since this started, I felt like I had the power. She betrayed me, and now she had to live with it. I left her sitting there alone and walked upstairs to the bedroom. I didn't want to hear her crying anymore. I just wanted her to know that I wasn't the same man she thought I was. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds, I sat on the edge of the bed, looking around the room. Everything here was soaked in her. The lingering scent of her perfume in the air. Her clothes draped over the chair. The framed photos on the nightstand. I took a deep breath. I knew this was my house, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled out a suitcase. Every movement felt heavy. I packed methodically, jeans, a couple of shirts, a few t-shirts. I wasn't taking much. The rest didn't matter. I heard the footsteps before she even opened the door. I already knew what was coming. She stood there, eyes red-rimmed, lips trembling. Then she saw the suitcase. Her face went pale. No. I kept packing. Mark, no. I didn't respond. She stepped into the room, grabbing my arm. Please, don't do this. I slowly lifted my gaze. And what am I supposed to do, Steph? Her shoulders shook. Stay. Give me a chance. My jaw tightened. A chance? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can fix this. I let out a bitter laugh. Fix it? How? By turning back time? I'll do anything you want. I shut the suitcase. I wanted you not to betray me. A strangled sob left her lips. I was stupid. I didn't know what I was doing. I nodded. You figured that out when I caught you. She froze. I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door. No. She clutched my shoulder. I turned back. Stephanie. She let out a broken breath. Don't go. I can't do this without you. I stared at her for a long moment. I couldn't do it either. And then I walked away. She didn't chase after me. She didn't try to stop me. I closed the door behind me, got into my car, and exhaled. A long, heavy breath. As I started the engine, for the first time in a long while, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was no longer the man being deceived. I was no longer the man who believed. Now, I was the man who left. And that was enough.